not First Nations people from 200 years ago, pre-contact. We're First Nations people that have a really interesting dark history in this country, and so now we're coming out of that. It's powerful that we have the ability to be able to control the parameters of how we re-emerge into the world.
Each person in the group is an artist of some sort. All of us have this desire and passion within us to be creative.
We have two different views and two different worlds coming together to try to make something that works.
Because we were doing the really true fusion piece more in a traditional style, and we really take it in a whole new electronic direction.
In our art form, I think a lot of people are scared of technology. It doesn't necessarily make you a more creative person, but it gives you the ability to be able to try new things and to evolve.
Dakhká Khwáan is a Tlingit name. It is a name that states the inland people. Our relations and our background goes all the way from coastal Alaska, northern BC, to the interior near Carcross, Teslin, Atlin, Whitehorse area, because we married with the Tagish people. At the very beginning, when we didn't know as much about our language, we were often saying Dakhká Khwáan. And in our language, Dakhká Khwáan means surrounded by smallpox, which is probably something we would not want to call ourselves. So that's all part of the learning, to make sure that when we do sing our songs, that we are saying the words properly and that we are paying the proper respects for those songs.
So I'm Daniel Ashley. My friends call me Dash, which is my first and last name smashed together. Been a DJ for 15 years, starting by the time I was 14. Growing up here in the Yukon, been producing music almost as long, first as a vocalist and doing hip hop and rapping, and then moving into production through electronic music and also, yeah, all kinds of beats.
For me, I was in a dance group as a child. I started when I was 2. Back in the 70s, my mom started a dance group, and as a child, I don't remember having very much of the creative process being a part of it. It was just, this is how you do it, this is how you move, here's the songs. I remember, having a lot of fun, but at the same time, back in those days, I don't really feel like society was as open as it is now, or welcoming or accepting of our culture, period.
There's a lot of troublesome things that was happening in a lot of the communities, particularly back in the 70s and stuff. And I was raised outside of the Yukon, and I remember while being raised, I knew I was First Nation, but I didn't know what that meant. And I remember growing up with a lot of identity issues. I didn't know what it meant to be Tlingit. So I remember always growing up kind of confused and kind of not sure really who I was with my identity.
Being a First Nations person and not growing up fully with an intact identity about who I was, that made a powerful feeling within me to give that back to people. I think it's important that people know their history and their lineage and where they come from.
The 70s in the Yukon, 70s anywhere in Canada, was a much different place, as far as receptivity and openness and kind of validation of our culture. So I remember sometimes feeling a little bit like really shy and kind of put down a little bit, unless we were in environments that were ours. Because we have to remember, people weren't dancing and singing very much. It was against the law.
When I came back home, I hadn't come to the Yukon from the time when I was 4.5, 5 years old until when I was 19. I hadn't talked to anybody in the Yukon. I was completely raised outside. So when I came back home to the Yukon in the Carcross area to find out my family heritage, my family up here, my father's side, I saw the world that we have as a nation up here. I didn't know which world to walk in. It took me a number of years to realize this is who I am. Once I found out what it really meant to be Tlingit, to feel that you belong, it just was a fire that caught underneath me.
Well, I grew up being very shy. My first experiences of like hearing the songs, I'd say would be at potlatches as well. They're very, the way that our culture works and our origins is everything is connected to one another. So you don't experience a feast and just like go there to eat. You have ceremony there, you have your dances, you have like what we call our business that is carried out at feasts as well and our potlatches. So I'd say I heard singing at functions like that. It's just always been around. I've been very fortunate to have that and to be rooted in my community.
So yeah, I started drawing really at a young age. My mom was actually the one that inspired me to get into this art because she went to Juno Celebration in 2008. And she sent me a video of people dancing and performing. And I remember dancing and performing as a young kid. I remember it was part of my life. I remember going to potlatches and always having to get up and dance. But it wasn't until I saw that video, and there was, because at our potlatches in Carcross, there would be an average of 200 to 300 people. But at the celebration, there was over 2,000 people dancing at a time. And I found that to be tremendously powerful.
For me, dancing has always been a part of me, like I said. And so I danced as a kid, danced as a teenager, then I just stopped. And I'm not really sure why, but it was always there, and I always had the desire, right? I always wanted to dance. 2007, we were living in Carcross, the train came back, White Pass started again, and I thought to myself, we need to be a part of this, tourism action. So we started a little show. I got in touch with a few people, like 6. We got funding, and we started a show. We thought we were gonna make so much money, and it was just gonna be fantastic. But what actually happened was one day around the middle of the summer, we went up to the train deck and the train just came in. And so we decided, let's sing a song so we can attract people down to our theater. But what happened is they just walked by us and they were just ignoring us. And I looked over at the group and everyone kind of looked so heartbroken. And I just thought to myself, you know what? This is never happening again. We are never going to be ignored and made to feel like crap on our own territory, in our own community, doing our songs and our dances. Like those days are over, right? And so we went back to the theater and we regrouped and we talked things out and we just said, you know what? This is actually about us. This is us reclaiming our culture and our identity. And so we kind of shifted direction at that moment and it just evolved into a dance group.
When I joined the group, it was still relatively small. So we were doing just smaller performances for community and smaller performances for potlatch and ceremony and stuff like that. And we didn't really have any sort of ceremonial regalia for ourselves. We didn't have any dance tunics or any sort of hats or anything. So we had nothing really to represent us. I remember Marilyn started out with a scarf and a drum. I remember Gary I think he had his grandmother's tunic and a headdress that belonged to his grandmother as well. But over the time that we've learned, a lot of the dance group members have taken it upon themselves to start creating their own thing or commissioning other artists, hiring other artists to create things for them. And so we spent a lot of time with other community members in dance groups and other people that hold lots of traditional knowledge. We started seeking them out and just trying to find out as much as we can. We fell in love with trying to figure out what it means to be like song and dance performers.
But when they started the dance group, I think I was around 11. And at the time I still was very shy. I was going just at the verge of being a teenager. And I remember watching them dance. It was at the Yukon Inn. And I remember sitting there and they came through the doors. I remember seeing some of our dancers' headdresses. I remember seeing them drum in and how loud it was. We're kind of known for how loud we can sing in our drum beats.
Yeah, it was mostly just looking for connection because I was always engaged with my culture, but I never fully understood, I think, a lot of the ceremonial aspects of our culture. And it wasn't until, I think, song and dance really kind of blew up in my face as to how powerful it could be, is when I started seeing the true power behind our art forms and our culture.
Most of the time when I danced, especially when I was learning, I always tried to envision being amongst my ancestors. I'll never forget there was a song that we were singing. When I opened my eyes were staring at these 2 elders. These 2 elders, they had the biggest smiles on the face and tears coming down. And that was when I realized this is who I am. This is what I'm meant to do.
our dancing and our singing and our drumming. Even though we've always had that, like the one thing I'm really proud about my community of Carcross is we've always danced. We never lost that. We've always potlatched. But parts of it became hazy. And I use that terminology, you know, because I feel like we're reawakening certain aspects.
For many years, we were not allowed to sing or dance. I hear these stories from our grandparents. It was something that they were told they were not allowed to. I think that really hurt who we are as people. Our songs, when we dance, for the different purposes of why we dance, there's a lot of ceremony behind that. There's a lot of feelings, a lot of emotion. And when that's restrained, when that's restricted, that can cause bad things to happen.
As Indigenous people, there's a lot of pain. Our people were displaced, you know, from their identity. And, you know, I can't think of anything that is more painful than to feel displaced away from your own heart and your own soul and your own spirit. Been made to feel bad, that you're less than, that you're stupid, and that your culture is bad. But that's what we've come through. We just can't walk forward and pretend things haven't happened or things in our community aren't there when they are, you know. So that's what deconstruct means. And reconstruct basically is that, you know, we're through this process of revitalization, through this process of healing our hearts, that we're reconstructing stronger families, stronger individuals, stronger communities, you know, and the foundation of that is our own culture and our language. The dancing and singing is a healer, absolutely. And I think every single one of us knows that and recognizes that and has felt it numerous times.
Daniel was pretty rad in elementary school. Actually, I remember it distinctly. He was starting a drama club. I remember that. And music was a part of his life, which was mine too.
DJ Dash, he has just blown me away with his commitment, his dedication, his drive, you know, his leadership. Just incredible talent, incredible kindness. He's really, really been at the forefront of bringing this whole project together.
My brother Galen and myself were doing some performing at the 2010 Olympics as part of the Yukon cultural contingent, and the Dakhká Khwáan dancers were there as well. We were already deep into doing electronic music and production, and they were, you know, just coming into their own as a really powerful group. And even back then, we sort of had this idea, we're like, oh, wouldn't this be an awesome project to sort of try and fuse these two styles of music.
After watching Daniel perform and the Olympics and stuff like that, it kind of came more to a head that I wanted to do that. And so I remember distinctly us talking about it backstage before a performance, like sometime in the future, we gotta do this.
Maybe I'll just start by talking a little bit about the history of electronic music. So my background is actually coming from the like hip-hop and electronic music scene. And when I was growing up from the age of about 14, I was super into it. My older brother was a DJ, and so I got into it from there in the like late 90s, early O's. And back then what was super big was house music, which has this real 4/4 rhythm. So this is like a classic house track. And what's really powerful about it and why it works for DJs is because you've got 4 on the floor, as we call it. It's just unts, unts, unts. So that's like a really sort of tribal thing, and you know, that's really what made electronic music tick. Ironically enough, back in the early O's, my brother, who was living in Ottawa, had a roommate whose name was Bear. And later on he started a group which was called A Tribe Called Red.
Well, Tribe Called Red really inspired me when they came up to the Yukon to do a show. I didn't want to do something exactly like that, but I knew that of the group of people that were there, the young people, it was a good path to go on.
I'd say this new scene of music, it just like, it fires up the youth, and they're like, yeah, we have a voice. We have something to say.
Tribe Called Red and other artists are talking about decolonizing. They're talking about healing. They're talking about our journey. And most importantly, we're still here and we're alive and we survived. And we're not just surviving anymore, but we're doing well.
That is what sparked like the next genesis moment of trying to put something together to connect with people.
We'd heard a bunch of their music and I was a super big fan, and they came up and played the Frostbite Music Festival here. I really felt like I got it because I came from this electronic music background of house music, and what I saw going on at their show is really this same kind of vibe when you go to a live DJ show. They're this really deep and powerful, ancient culture with the vocals and the melodies that were being sung. And so I was in the gym here at the college. There was like 600 people there and we were just all throwing down, and it was cool. It was something special. I was like, that's a cool type of music. Maybe we could do something like that in the Yukon. We've talked about doing things like that in the Yukon, so let's find a way to make it happen.
I just remember getting a phone call. I just remember Daniel saying, hey man, we're gonna do this. I need you. I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it, man, I'm there.